Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second in the Nebo Company's webinar series, Smart Strategies for Talent Development. Our topic today is making the most of coaching. To start by introducing myself, my name is Izzy Martins, and I am the Client Experience Manager at the Nebo Company. The Nebo Company is a leadership development firm located in Washington, D.C., and the Nebo Company works at the intersection of strategy, development, leadership, and culture, providing trainings, retreats, and executive coaching to leaders. Today, we are delighted to share insights from almost 15 years of work with leaders. But before we begin, I just want to start by giving you a few basic instructions for how to interact with the webinar today. The first point is that at one point in the webinar today, I'll ask you to participate in a group poll, and I'll give you instructions when that time comes, but please do participate. The second thing is to type in your questions. So none of you have access to audio at this time, and it will stay that way throughout the webinar. But if you have questions at any time, feel free to write in those questions using either the question and answer or the chat function in your Zoom window. At the end of the webinar, Kate will save a little bit of time to answer questions. And if we don't get to your question, then we'll make sure to email you a response after the webinar. The last thing is troubleshooting. So if you run into any issues at any time during the webinar, you're welcome to send a chat, or you can also email me directly. My email address is imartins@nebocompany.com. And now I am pleased to introduce our speaker today, Kate Ebner. Kate Ebner is the CEO and founder of the Nebo Company and the founding director of Georgetown University's Institute for Transformational Leadership, where she also serves on the faculty of the Transformational Leadership Program and has been a member of the Leadership Coaching Program. Kate served as Chief People Officer at Kaiser Associates, an international strategy consulting firm. As a coach and facilitator, Kate works with leaders who want to deliver on their mission and vision to achieve transformational outcomes. So with that, Kate, I will turn it over to you.
Izzy, thank you very much, and welcome everyone. I'm so glad that you've taken time to join me today for this webinar. This is one of my favorite subjects, and it's one that I've wanted to talk about for some time. Our title, Making the Most of Coaching, really refers to a phrase that I find myself often using when I am helping leaders who are thinking about working with a coach consider what they can gain from it. And over the years, I've really appreciated that the sponsor, the person who's potentially paying for the coaching out of their budget or supporting the coaching across an organization, have a really strong stake in the coaching as well. So how does a sponsor make the most of coaching? And I'm also interested in what's the impact of coaching if an organization decides that this is a strategy they want to invest in. How does an organization make the most of coaching? So some of the questions that I frequently hear and wanted to begin with today are these. The first one is maybe from the perspective of the person who's about to work with a coach. The question will be, what should I expect from the coaching process and my coach? You might think of this question another way, which is, what's going to happen to me if I decide to do this? And I think one of the things we want to talk a little bit about today in this webinar is not only how to answer that question, but more specifically, what is the coaching process and what can you expect? Another question that comes up is, how do I know the investment I'm making is a good one for the company? You know, we could spend our dollars a lot of different ways. Maybe you have competing demands on your budget. Is this the right time? Is this the right investment? What does it mean to do this within our company, especially if this is the first foray into coaching? And we'll talk a little bit about that. As a sponsor, I know coaching is confidential. So how do I know if the coaching's on track? This is something that at Nebo we've been paying a lot of attention to in the past few years. We want to make sure that the people who are sponsoring coaching for their direct reports or for their leaders have a way of understanding how to participate in the process and how they can know how it's going. even though the coaching conversation is indeed confidential. Will coaching get me where I want to go? Like, does this really work? And this is one of the questions that really makes me smile, because the answer is sort of like yes, as long as you make the commitment you need to make on your end. In other words, the coach doesn't have the magic, you do, but the coaching process does unlock it. So we'll talk about how a coaching engagement takes shape and what the flow of coaching might look like. How do I know how much to share with my sponsor about what I'm working on with my coach? This is again from the perspective of the leader being coached. And I think initially in the beginning of many coaching engagements, especially if the person has not received coaching before, there's a concern about sort of who will know what I'm talking about with my coach, and do I need to keep my sponsor apprised? And if so, to what degree? So we're going to talk about the answers to these questions in a flow today over the next 40 minutes or so. And I want to organize that flow almost by looking at the three stakeholder groups: the organization, the sponsor, and the client, and really taking this question, how do you make the most of coaching from each of these angles? So we'll start with the organizational perspective. And I think from an organization's perspective, coaching can be perceived in a number of different ways. Some people might view it as an investment, and I think anyone who's making the allocation from their budget would certainly perceive it that way, and it is. It's certainly an investment of money, but it's also an investment of time. It's an investment in some ways of faith in the potential of the person that whom you're investing in. Coaching is not something that happens overnight, so you might organize a training session that happens next Tuesday and then it's done. Coaching is a process that unfolds. So you're actually making an investment in the idea that a leader, a person, can grow and change, and that the coaching process, which usually unfolds over a period of months, can be a pathway for that positive change. Coaching is a gift. I think in the best of all worlds, we have some clients who always say, I'm so grateful for the gift of coaching. And I think if you're an organizational leader thinking about making the investment in coaching for your people, you do want them to perceive that this is a really fortunate investment, and that in many ways it's a gift toward their future. It's an investment in their potential, in their development, and in the organization as a result of that. I think that framing of a gift is very nice framing, and often really resonates. It also helps debunk the idea that I'm getting coaching because of something I'm doing wrong. And I think if you're in a position to frame the opportunity to be coached to someone who's about to receive coaching, this is really a nice metaphor to use in good language. The third way organizations sometimes perceive coaching is we want to keep our best people. We need to use coaching to help us not only invest in and develop and give the gift of believing in the potential of this leader, but we really want to keep this leader. And I think when your organization decides to invest in coaching for you, it often really does deepen the commitment that you might feel toward the organization, and certainly is evidence of the care and commitment you have to your employees. Sometimes coaching is perceived as a last-ditch effort, and by that, we really mean, nothing's working. We don't want to lose this talented person, but something's got to change, something's got to give, or this isn't going to work. And, we'll talk more about this as we go, but I think one distinction that I bring to you as a leadership coach and as the CEO of a coaching company is that often coaching is perceived as a way to save someone or fix someone. And in the work that we do here at Nebo, we really focus on coaching for potential rather than corrective coaching, or the idea of we're going to fix anyone. That said, almost every one of us, myself included, benefit from growth and change and learning something new. And so one of the things we really check in on as we begin a coaching engagement is, how has our client organization framed the coaching? Are they seeing it as a positive investment into the future to really get their leadership team rowing in the same direction? Are they seeing it as an investment in the right people, or are they wanting it to fix something that otherwise they don't think could be fixed? And if that's the case, we're very, very cautious about moving forward, might recommend other solutions. So what are your options if you're thinking about investing in coaching? You have 5, and we've laid out 4 of these in our last webinar and talked a bit about them. So I won't dwell here today, other than to say that leadership coaching is one-on-one coaching. The only difference between leadership coaching and executive coaching would be the level of the leader. So C-suite or CEO, COO, CFO type leaders might be called executive coaching or executive leadership coaching because of the executive function of the leader. And I think the leadership coaching piece is the term that we prefer here at Nebo, but we certainly coach leaders at all levels using the framing of leadership coaching. Executive coaching may have some additional inputs, process steps, in order to ensure that what's happening is at the level of intensity and can make the difference that the senior most people really need. Team coaching is often used for senior leadership teams, executive leadership teams, can be used for cross-functional teams when you really want to get a group of people to work extremely well together and produce a really important output. Group coaching, we talked about last time, is often used for a more junior group, and it has a peer element to it that's pretty interesting. The thing I want to focus on for a moment here is this last one, the culture of coaching. Increasingly, we're seeing companies are investing in teaching their leaders how to use coaching skills in their management and leadership of their teams. And so when we think about like an organization deciding to invest, let's have a culture of coaching, let's have a coaching culture, that often means doing some training and some development of leaders and managers about how to have conversations using a coach approach that actually develop the organization and the people in it. And we're doing quite a lot of this at Nebo. We see it at Georgetown as well. There's a strong interest in not necessarily the classic one-on-one coaching, which is already very popular, but actually expanding the concept of coaching into an approach an organization can take toward culture building and ensuring that it's a developmental culture and one that supports the growth of employees. So what is the impact of coaching on organizations? I've been thinking about this quite a bit, and what my mind goes back to when I first entered the field of coaching back in 2002, where I think an article that came out in the Harvard Business Review written by a friend of ours, Strat Sherman, talked about the wild west of coaching, and coaching was perceived as kind of a woo-woo or out there profession. It was certainly perceived as something that may or may not be valuable. Over time, coaching has proven itself as a smart investment for organizations. And I think one of the moments of proving was really around the 2008 recession, when a lot of training budgets were cut. But interestingly, the coaching budgets were not. And what you saw was, as leaders had to handle increasingly complex, under-resourced, challenging situations in their organizations, working with a coach was a really key way to keep their wits about them, to grow through the experience, and to keep the talented leaders responsible for moving through that period in place. We saw an increase in dollars spent on coaching at that time, and that's continued since from 2010 and beyond. The impact of coaching on organizations is interesting when you look at some of the research, and this is coming from the Institute of Coaching. 80% of people who receive coaching report increased self-confidence. And as a leadership coach, I know that when my clients feel confident, they are more capable of taking bold action, of thinking creatively, of raising smart questions, and of leading peers and others more effectively. So that's, I think, a very significant finding. 86% of companies report that they recoup their investment on coaching and more, and that's kind of a general finding. But I think when we think about the more, it's often not just here's why we hired the coach, and yes, that was a good investment in terms of we got the outcome we wanted. But there's often a reframing of what it means to be a leader. In other words, not only I'm working on my objectives for my leadership position to make sure that my company is successful, but I've begun to see that by meeting my challenges at work, I can grow, I can get better, I can learn, I can open up new doors of possibility. So there's an energizing effect that comes from an investment in coaching. 70% benefit from improved work performance, relationships, and more effective communication skills. And I think as a coach, again, my mind instantly goes to some of the conversations I've had over the years with my clients. The idea that it doesn't have to be the way it is, it can be better. And I can't control everybody else, but I surely can think about how I'm participating. And since I can make choices about myself with awareness, with a conscious effort, and with the courage to try some new things, I might actually be able to shift the dynamic, create a more positive effect, be perceived more positively and effectively, and ultimately communicate better, which is key to leadership. So the impact of coaching has really been proven, and it is a great investment if you want to really see the kinds of results we're talking about. The net effect over time of coaching, I believe, is that people are learning that it's their job to grow. So coaching empowers people to learn from experience. And one of the fundamentals of teaching people how to become coaches is teaching them to think of another human being as a completely sufficient and whole, resourceful human being who is meeting challenges, but doesn't need you to swoop in and fix, instead needs you to bring the coaching process. And so when we're in a conversation with someone who believes that we actually can find our own answers, that we don't need to be saved, it's a different feeling than most every other conversation. And ultimately, people in a coaching relationship learn how to take responsibility, learn how to step up to their challenges, and learn how to see the potential of what happens when we're a little bit uncomfortable and we stay with it anyway. So empowering people to learn from experience is really what comes for an organization when you invest in coaching. So could you benefit from coaching in your organization? Here are 8 questions, and we are recording this webinar. We're also going to be sharing these materials with you since you signed on for it. So I will go through these quickly rather than discuss them. I think these are questions that you could ask yourself as you reflect on your own organization. And the first one is in some ways cuts right to the chase. Are the leaders in key positions meeting your expectations? Do your leaders demonstrate authentic, credible presence? Do your top leaders foster a culture that engages and develops employees at all levels? Do your leaders have the skills and maturity to navigate conflict and tough challenges together? Can your leadership team articulate a shared purpose, clear near-term focus, and compelling long or medium-term vision? How concerned are you about losing your most talented people? Do your leaders demonstrate confidence and resourcefulness in solving complex problems? And lastly, how ready is your team if you needed to step out for 6 months or more? And these questions are sort of designed to get you thinking about, am I getting what I need from my leaders? And what could we use more of, or what would we like to see that we aren't getting? And here I'd like to challenge you as you're listening to notice where you might have resigned yourself, like, well, it's the most we can expect, or they're doing their best, or something like that. You might want to step back and think about, what if we were dynamite? What if we were really working incredibly effectively, individually and together? And if the answer is that there's some kind of a gap between where you are and where you'd like to be, coaching might be a really good place to go. So how do you get coaches to join up with your organization effectively? And here are just some best practices from our work with organizations that have a coaching culture or have a commitment to coaching that's developed and evolved over time. The first one is a great best practice. I once worked with a corporation that did an annual meeting of all the coaches who worked in the organization with their leaders. They would host a 2-hour meeting at their headquarters. We would come from all over the country, actually, and sit down, and they would give us a briefing on the state of their business and where they saw the business needing to go in the year ahead. And they would ask us to share themes and insights from our work, not revealing any confidential perspective, but just bubbling back up what we were learning about the organization. It was a fun, engaging session. And what it did is it helped all of us who were coaching in that organization understand the context in which our leaders were leading. So I share that with you as a best practice, and I think it's a great idea if you're using a lot of coaches already to consider bringing them together for that kind of a conversation. Another thing you can do is have a conversation with coaches before they get started to give them the background context similar to what I've just described. And here are some examples of what you might cover. You could talk about your own internal process for setting up a coach in your system. Sometimes you need us to sign paperwork or NDA agreements, those kinds of things. If the more you can help us understand how to get started, the easier and faster it is for the coach. We recommend that you find providers of coaching services whom you trust and who you can stay with consistently, because the longer we work with you, the more we know about your organization, your culture, and the more that we can help you think about how you develop leaders and the potential of leaders. Share any great or not great experiences you've already had. You may have tried this already and have some doubts or some concerns. The more we know about what you're looking for and not looking for, the better we can adapt the way we approach our services. And I would say also to take a deeper look at who's coaching in your organization. My guess is that if you're already using coaches, you probably are using about 20% of what they could potentially do for you in your organization. Most of us who come to this profession come with depth and breadth of background beyond coaching. And lastly, respond in a timely way to communications from the coach. I want to talk about the sponsor's perspective for a moment. And here, if you're the sponsor, what that means is you've decided that your direct report would benefit from coaching, and you are going to find the money in your budget to invest in them. It could also mean that you are the HR leader at your organization who oversees the hiring and engaging of coaches, and you are the shepherd of that process. So we shared this material last time. When is the right time to invest in someone, particularly for coaching? And I think it's really when you see the commitment, the openness and readiness, when you perceive this person as valuable to the future, and when you believe in the potential that this person has. They may be a top performer who you just want to really help them take it to the next level. It could be that it's someone who's got a lot of great things, but maybe something that you'd like to see them work on. And I would say that whatever the reason, the key is to make sure that you're investing in people you want to keep and that you believe that they have the potential to learn and grow. So we want to ask you to do a group poll in answer to this question. What, if any, concerns do you have when you consider investing in coaching for a direct report?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. So I will launch the group poll right now, and you should see it pop up on your screen. So if everyone could take just a minute to cast your vote. So I'll run through the answers, the possible answers. So the question is, what, if any, concerns do you have when you consider investing in coaching for a direct report? It could be cost, it could be confidentiality, how will I know what's happening? It could be, I don't want my employee to talk about me with someone else. It could be, is it scalable for other leaders? How to determine who is getting the coaching? It could be how you're evaluating the success of the engagement. It could be that it's a hassle to vet and select a coach, or the final choice is, what if it doesn't work? So I'll give you just another 30 seconds or so. So if you haven't casted your vote, please do so, and then we'll take a look.
And this is again from the perspective of the sponsor, right? So you're the person who's going to fund and support this process.
Alrighty, so it looks like about 70% of you have casted your vote. We'll give you just another moment. And now let's take a look at the results. Okay, so here are the results. It looks like the majority voted for how to evaluate the success of the engagement. And then the second runner-up would be the cost. And then after that is it scalable for other leaders? How to determine who gets coaching? Kate, any insights on these results?
You know, I learned from our last webinar that that it's helpful to give a little bit of a reaction. So I would say I'm not surprised to see that the sort of winner, but significantly so, is how do we evaluate the success of the engagement? Is the concern, and I think that one is one that we're planning to talk a little bit more about right now, and I'm hoping will help you with. Is it working? Is it helping? And who gets to decide that? Is it the leader evaluating, I made progress, or do we need to be able to see tangible outcomes? And I think those are the things you want to be talking about before you get started with the coaching, with the coach and with the leader. I think the other things, are interesting to me. That the cost piece is 38%. I might have thought that would be a little higher, actually. But I think when you want to make the investment, I think the biggest concern, it looks like to me, is, was it a good investment? Did it work? And you notice that, what if it doesn't work? I had 20% of the votes here. So there's a concern there about, about outcome.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
So the sponsor's role can be described as, I think, with 4 pieces. And so I want to talk about the specific areas of responsibility for you as a sponsor that could really help you be more effective as you make coaching happen for your direct report or for your employees. First of all, parameters. You are the person who will establish the parameters for the coaching engagement. A typical engagement will be some number of months in duration. An average coaching engagement at the Nebo company is 6 months, and it may include anywhere from 6 to 12 coaching sessions. The parameters that affect coaching engagements include your budget, the timing or the duration. That, like, you might say, I think this is, we like to invest for a year, or we really need to see results quickly and we want to invest in the 6 months, but we need to see something happen in the first 4. So there might be a relationship between duration and budget. We'd love to do a longer engagement, but what we can afford is this. And because we can only afford 4 months, we think it should be 6 sessions plus an assessment. So it's sort of starting to work with the provider of coaching services to really establish the parameters. This also helps your leader understand what the features and what the constraints are for the coaching work. A choice you have is whether or not assessments will be included. We often use the DISC assessment. We often do a 360. We also do something we call stakeholder interviews. You might choose something like the Myers-Briggs or the Hogan, the Enneagram. There's a lot of choices out there. And then finally, what are your expectations for the work? How do you want the process to work? If you have a lot of experience working with coaches, you may have a method you like to apply. You're going to set that parameter for both the coach and the leader. The second piece is objectives. You're working with your direct report to explain the investment, including your intention. Why are you supporting them in coaching? You're going to be working with them most likely to help refine what their coaching objective is. And that phrase I'm using, coaching objective, is an actual phrase that those of us trained as coaches know very well. And it's really, what's the point of this coaching? And let's make sure that the leader can articulate it and that the sponsor understands it and even has an opportunity to influence it. Third, you're going to provide feedback. You might have done this as you set up the coaching. You might have been doing it through the existing performance management and review processes in your company, but you're probably going to be giving feedback to the coach. You might be giving feedback as part of 360 in the middle of the process. You might be participating in stakeholder interviews, but feedback is a way that you contribute and can be engaged. And then the fourth thing is support. Coaching is a conversation for action and for change, but the change won't happen overnight. So you've got to be patient while the coaching unfolds and allow your leader to learn from the process and from trial and error and self-observation and all the other things coaching brings. We often say, as we teach people how to coach, that we're teaching the coach to trust the process. We also need to teach the leader and the sponsor to trust the process. And that means not to evaluate it too quickly, but to support it. And in particular, we see an opportunity at the end of a coaching engagement to sit down with the leader and say, what did you learn? And how will you continue your learning as you go forward without the coaching? So there's an opportunity at the beginning, through the feedback process, in the middle, and the end to support continued learning. How do you know it's working. So here are some ideas about what you might look for when a coaching engagement's underway. You might look for new behaviors and different ways of participating. Sometimes people will say, I'm seeing something different from so-and-so in the meeting, or I'm noticing that where she normally would jump right in, she's holding back, right? So look for those behavioral clues that something new is being practiced. You might notice more thoughtful and deliberate responses, less reactivity, greater self-awareness, and even ownership of self. So the leader you might notice, like, he actually apologized for that, or he actually realizes that he's interrupting, and observe that out loud. You might see that self-awareness occurring. More introspection. And this is something that we're all busy and have trouble doing, but a coaching process really requires us to be more introspective. More direct communication. Part of coaching is often emboldening leaders to speak more directly and to find their voices and to say what they need to say. And so you might find that someone receiving coaching is asking for a different kind of conversation from you. Increased openness to feedback. You start to get the hang of it with your coach. You realize feedback is gold. It's how we learn. And you're going to see, hopefully, more openness to feedback. You might see more engagement, more energy and enthusiasm, and better team participation. So these are some things you could be looking for. Might be interesting to think about if there are other things that you would love to see from particular coaching engagements. The one thing I wanted to emphasize today, and for the sponsors, and that's that coaching is a confidential conversation, but it's not protected by law the way that a conversation with your therapist or your doctor or your priest is, your lawyer is. So coaches can be subpoenaed into a court of law, and we are taught not to take copious notes on our coaching conversations because we don't want to make our clients vulnerable. We don't want to be vulnerable by all the things we've recorded. But having said all of that, it's a conversation that we can't play back to you, the sponsor. We can't tell you what our clients are telling us. And in fact, if there's a sense that there's some kind of a loop back to the sponsor, often leaders will hold back and not take full advantage of the coaching. Coaches must not share specifics of conversations, and they're trained to request that the leader or the client and the sponsor have those direct conversations. So our coaches at Nebo, for example, will say, we'd love to check in with you, sponsor, about how it's going. The two of us, leader and coach, would like to sit down with you, sponsor, to talk about that. Or perhaps the coach will do the conversation with the sponsor, but with perfect transparency for the leader client, so that there's not some kind of a backdoor conversation. Engaged sponsors ask, how engaged? So sponsors asking me about the people I'm coaching will ask me, how engaged is this leader in this work with you, Kate? And I'll explain they haven't missed a meeting, they're on time, they're completing their assignments, they're following through on agreements we have, they're able to take insights and ahas from our sessions, and I'm hearing about new outcomes that they're discovering through this work, right? So how engaged is a really good question for you to ask. What's the objective for the coaching is a fair question to ask. How are things progressing? Do you see momentum? Do you see some traction? What did you learn from your work with this leader? What can I do to support you, the leader, during and after the coaching? What could I do to support the coaching process? These are all good questions for you as sponsors to ask. And if you ask these questions, you're going to find that indeed you do get more out of the experience of supporting coaching, because you're going to have much more perspective on what makes a great engagement and how coaches think, as well as how your leaders are thinking. I'm going quickly, but I wanted to touch down on how clients can make the most of coaching here. And one of the top questions we see when we're working with leaders is the question here at the top: how do I choose a coach? Do I need someone with the same background as me? When is the right time to work with a coach? How do what can I expect from the coaching once the process begins? Okay, now I've chosen my coach. How do I prepare myself for a coaching session? What if I decide to leave my company and they're paying for the coaching? I will tell you all that often people begin a coaching engagement with the idea that they may need to make a career change. And I would say that maybe 7 times out of 10, that's really not what they decide they need to do. So for those sponsors who are worried that they're going to hire a coach who then coaches the person toward a new career, let me just tell you as a coach that often the opportunities right in front of us are the right ones. We just need to see from a different angle. And often coaches play a key role in retaining, as I said before. So this question, if I decide to leave and they're paying for it, is it a problem? My response is always, your company, your organization needs motivated, committed leaders. And so if you're not motivated, if you're not committed, that's no good for the organization. And we'll talk about this. If they are committed and demonstrate desire to learn and grow on the job, then we'll go forward. If I feel like they're not committed, I would let the company know. How do I sustain momentum and focus once coaching is over? So when you're not here with me anymore, coach, will I be able to carry this forward? Those are good questions and questions that coaches are prepared to answer. I wanted to point out that the client needs to set a coaching objective with the coach. And that by the coaching objective, again, what we mean is a focus for the engagement. That coaching objective should align with the developmental feedback that the leader has already been getting. So if you've just had a performance review or a 360 review, what are those themes? What are the messages you're hearing? Let's make sure your coaching aligns with that. If you have a big goal that you as a leader need to accomplish, then let's put that on the table. Let's make sure that what we're doing in the coaching has everything to do with your success in the organization. The objective should be big and broad enough to actually give us some wiggle room so that we can work creatively underneath that idea. And here are some sample coaching objectives. And again, I'm not going to read through these right now, but I simply wanted to give you a sense of the kinds of things that leaders are declaring as their objective for their work with a coach. And as you look through them, you can see that there's a range of topics here. The list goes on, but it's important to realize that the coaching isn't just a chat you're having every couple of weeks. It's actually organized around a particular declaration called a coaching objective made early on in the engagement. The flow of a coaching engagement is something that we coaches pay a lot of attention to, right? So the key is to get started with a strong kickoff. And you'll see with the orange indicators that that's actually what happens before the coaching even begins, right? So the coach is selected, the client gets matched, and then the scheduling happens to get the coaching going. And this can take a little bit of time. So I know that from my perspective, if you're thinking about hiring a coach, it may be that you want to get started next week, but more likely it's going to take a week or two to get the coach selected and the process going. Once the process starts going, coaching session 1 and then on into the future, one of the things I wanted to share with you is that coaching has a beginning, a middle, and an end. In the beginning, it's all about getting to know each other, building trust, understanding what's important to the client and what that coaching objective is. And then as we start to build momentum in the coaching, we might bring in the assessments. I usually do the DISC assessment first. At Nebo, we like to do that first because it gives us something quick we can work with. And then after we know each other better, somewhere usually around the midpoint, we'll initiate a 360 process or stakeholder feedback process or some other kind of a feedback loop. We don't do that right off the bat because we want to make sure we know you independent of that feedback rather than have our perspective of you shaped by the feedback at the onset. Sometimes there's variability in that, but I think it's a good rule of thumb. And then on with the coaching. And the coaching, we like to make sure there's coaching at the back end of a 360 so that we can work with the result and our findings there. So beginning, middle, and end. A good coaching engagement ends. It doesn't straggle on into the future forever. We might want to recontract and start again with a new scope of work and a new coaching objective, but we want to make sure that we remember coaching is a conversation for action and movement, and that there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. Some tips here for keeping momentum and making the most of it. And again, if you had to summarize all of these, it would really be you be the driver of your own development. Keep your commitment to the scheduled sessions, follow through on your assignments, report on progress, respond to email, give us notice if you must cancel or reschedule, And you could actually lose a session if you don't give notice, because most coaches will have a cancellation policy that requires 24-hour notice. Do come prepared to bring the agenda for the session. So this is for the sponsors too. You might wonder, like, is the coach bringing the agenda? The answer is no. We're going to ask our leaders, what would you like to focus on today? And we're going to make sure that the conversation we have links to that coaching objective, but we are going to expect our leaders to initiate and really take the lead on the session focus. Do provide constructive feedback to the coach. So if there's something about it that's not working well for you, let the coach know. They are in service to the success of this partnership. And do be open and honest in the conversation. That is key toward any relationship, but especially something as focused and as committed as a coaching conversation. I always ask my clients when we're starting off, if you were to characterize how things are right now for you and how you'd like them to be after we do this coaching work, could you do that? And they'll tell me, oh, here's how things are today. And after our work, I'd like to be able to say, this happened, or I no longer have this, or I now am able to do that, or I've created different conditions at work, whatever it is. I invite my clients to think about the before and the after. And I think that's a good way for you to make the most of coaching, is to think about, okay, I'm investing in this. How do I want it to be after I finish? The design framework that I'm sharing with you is just a way of understanding some of the elements that go into a coaching engagement. Hopefully this is helpful for you, no matter what lens you're looking through in your own role. Just understanding that coaching is not a sort of loose, rambling conversation. It's got a structure, it's got a flow, it's got a pattern, it has features. And it's really the coach's job to know all of that. The leader can relax and trust the process and let the coach lay out that process, while at the same time taking responsibility for the agenda for each session. Lastly, the rules of thumb we want to offer you as a bit of a summary is commit to coaching. If you're an organization, see it as a leadership development strategy that is linked to the success of your business. It's not little one-off things you're doing. It's part of how you're driving success for your organization. For sponsors, make sure you play an active role by being appropriately engaged and interested. Invest in that coaching for high potential employees, not fix-it situations. And for clients or leaders, bring focus and initiative to your work. Take responsibility for your own growth and development. We've included this slide here as a way of understanding what the responsibilities and opportunities are for each of the participant perspectives in a successful coaching engagement. And I'm not going to go through this, but I want you to know that you have it. I'd like to stop here. We have just a couple of minutes left, but love to hear any questions that people have or comments that you'd like to make.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kate. So in your Zoom window, you should see an option to send in a question. And if you'd like to write one in now, please do so. And while you think of a question, Kate, I have one to start us off. Someone asked, a concern that I might have as a sponsor would be, what if the coach's philosophy for how to guide the leader in approaching a situation is contrary to the philosophy that I or other leaders in the organization may have? And then they continue by just saying, advice and guidance is not value neutral. Any thoughts on that?
I agree with that. I think that that's where we want to make sure that you're working with trained and certified coaches who understand the coaching process, because the coach's philosophy should really be to empower the thinking of the leader, not to impart advice or direction about what that leader should do. A good coach will say, what do you think you should do? What does your organization expect from you? Versus saying, here's what I think you should do. And I think that's the distinction we spend so much time on at Georgetown, teaching people not to consult and not to advise, but rather to use listening, inquiry, powerful questions, and other strategies to actually coach. I think it's important as a sponsor that you meet the coaches who work in your organization, that you have some understanding of their philosophy, and that you have some sense of trust in the people you're working with. I feel like the strength of my relationships with many of my own coaching client organizations is that I'm neutral. Like, in other words, I am a partner to and in full support of the leader I'm coaching, but I'm understanding always that that leader works for the organization and that the leader's success is defined within the context of the organization. So I want to make sure that I'm aligned as a coach with what the organization's goals are, not just with what the leader is and I are talking about. And I think that takes knowing a bit more about the organization and understanding what's at stake for the leader and for the sponsor in the process. So I would put more time maybe into the front end to make sure you know each other well enough and that there's enough context.
Great, great. And we have a couple more coming through, so maybe we'll have time for about 2 more. And then if we don't get to your question, we'll make sure to send you an email. So the next question is, when do you know that it's time to leave a coaching relationship?
These are great questions. I think I always say my litmus test for coaching is that when you see I'm in your calendar, you should feel excited and pleased, not like, oh no, what are we going to talk about? Or is this even worth my time? Right. So I think one simple measure is, does working with this person feel purposeful and valuable to you? And if the answer is no, then you might bring that up to the coach and say, this isn't valuable enough for me. What else could we be doing? How else could this work? Or consider, if you've been working with that person perhaps for a long time, that you might want a different coach. Myself, I've worked with 3 or 4 different coaches at different times in my career, choosing them for very specific reasons. And I've had clients do the same. In fact, sometimes even on our engagements at Nebo, we'll say, we want to give you 8 sessions with this coach, but we think you might benefit from talking with this other coach for 2 sessions because of their background, for example, in somatic coaching. So I would say understanding that just because you've been matched doesn't mean that they need to be your coach forevermore or that you can't work with other people. Ask yourself, do I look forward to this? Is it valuable to me? And is this person bringing me what I need right now? And if the answer to any of those is no, I would say find a way to wrap it up with your coach. But I wouldn't necessarily give up on coaching. There are lots of us out there bringing many different talents to the work.
Great. And let's do just one more in regards to our timing here today. So our last question for today will be, do the sponsors sign off on the specific coaching objective?
I think that the answer varies somewhat depending on the organization. But when I think about best practices, I think that sponsors benefit and trust the work more when they know what the focus is. And I think it's a good process for the leader, having developed the coaching objective with their coach, to have a conversation with the sponsor and say, here's what we've got. Here's what I think our focus will be. I'd like your input. I'd love to just hear your reaction to this and make sure that that you support it, and that if you have other ideas that I've thought about them. And usually that conversation builds a lot of buy-in from both sponsor and leader. And it keeps coaching from being kind of a covert operation. If you want to do that, make sure that the coach knows as they start out that that's the process. The awkward thing is if the leader doesn't realize that the coaching objective will be shared with the sponsor, and then the coach finds themselves sort of directing the leader. So it's really good at the onset of coaching to sort of agree upon, here's how we're going to get started. Have a couple coaching sessions. Let's come back after 2 and share with me the objective you guys have developed. I'd love to weigh in on it. And your intent should be support, not to correct it to what you think it should be. But similarly, the leader should be open to your influence, and the coach needs to understand your perspective. So I do think it's a best practice.
Great. Well, like I mentioned, we will make sure to send a short email response for the other questions that we didn't get to live. Kate, thank you so much for our informative discussion. And I think before everyone signs off, we just want to make sure to invite you all to our next webinar. Kate, do you want to give a little sentence on this one?
Yeah. We're calling it Aligning and Energizing the Senior Leadership Team. And we know that senior leadership teams are the key to success for many organizations, that their effectiveness, their dysfunction has a huge effect. We know that CEOs lose sleep about how well or not well senior leadership team members are working together and independently. We'd like to really focus on 4 ways to energize the senior leadership team, and this will be on March 6th, 2019.
All right. Well, I think that's all that we have for you. Thanks everyone so much for signing in.
Thank you, everyone.